welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name is Hat.
And I am Stan.
And today we are back with another episode after a couple weeks, 2 weeks. What would you say, Stan?
Yeah, 3 weeks, little break.
Little break.
Yeah.
Ran into some real life issues. Eric is actually going to be taking a little bit of a break. He's got a expected child coming soon, so he's going to be taking a little break, but he said he wanted everyone to know that he will be back. He is not permanently exiting the premise of this podcast, so he will be back in about a month or so, maybe 2 months, but he'll definitely be back probably around, I think he said the Tales of Arise timeframe he's looking at. So just an FYI. But for this week's podcast, we want to be talking about the recent Final Fantasy 16 news. Yoshi P commented on the status of the game, gave us some insight and possible. He didn't really say what window it was going to come out in, but there's enough information there where we can kind of read into some possibilities there of what is and is probably not going to happen. And then also I'm going to be giving my Cris Tales impressions. I picked it up the other day. I've been playing it on Switch. Very excited to talk about that game. So I definitely want to give you all just my initial off the cuff thoughts of the game. I'm about 6 or 7 hours in. And then also we're going to be commenting on the Switch OLED and the Steam Deck releases. We're going to be contrasting them. We're going to be talking about the OLED, the Switch Pro, like the whole spectrum of things we're going to try to touch on. And it should be a pretty good episode, I think. So with that said, before we continue, I just want to say that we appreciate everyone, reaching out to us and just kind of making sure we're still alive and making on Twitter. And then also, commenting on Discord, giving us some additional ideas for what we can talk about in the future. And, it's not been really a disinterest thing with us. It's more been just life has been getting in the way with this current year. But, we're talking and we're kind of trying to come up with a way to keep this train rolling. And so we're definitely going to get things back on track. It's just been recent for me with work has been just crazy, but that's mostly in relation to last year's events. So it shouldn't be a permanent thing, and I think Stan, you're kind of in a similar boat, right?
Yep. It's been crazy busy for work for me too. So it's hard to find the time, but we'll figure it out.
We'll make it happen. All right. Yep. So let's jump into this Final Fantasy 16 information, or I should say comment by Yoshi P. I'm going to get this article up on the screen. And basically what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to read the comment here and then we'll just kind of discuss it. So basically this is from IGN that I'm reading this, and it says, during the most recent Final Fantasy 14 live letter from the producer stream, Final Fantasy 16 producer Naoki Yoshida revealed a few updates on the much anticipated game, including that the main story scenario is set in stone and that the English voiceovers are almost fully recorded. Unfortunately, it sounds like it may not be ready for show for Tokyo Game Show 2021, which runs from September 30th to October 3rd. As reported by GameSpot, this information comes via translation from the Final Fantasy 14 Discord channel of a conversation between Yoshi P, who is also the director-producer of Final Fantasy 14, and NieR director Yoko Taro during the live stream. Translators on Twitter, okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the translator, I should give that person some recognition, I should say. AITAIKI Mochi, MOCHI. So
she's involved with a lot of the translations for FF7 remake as well. Whenever there's news tidbits about that, she's like breaking news over there.
See, I'm really bad about that. I just see the breaking news and I don't bother to look at who translated it.
Yeah.
Unless it's Hion, because I know him.
Yeah. Well, it's usually her regarding like Square Enix's Japanese developers when they make comments and stuff.
Noted. Okay. So good job on this front. So she translated this conversation, and this is from Yoshi P, who says, quote, "We have all the scenarios set in stone already, and the voice recording for the English version is in its final stages. Development is going well. It's quite difficult to make sure the quality is amazing. We want the next announcement to be something where everyone watches and says, I'm going to buy this game. Thus, we are putting a lot of effort to make sure the quality is great. I want to show something at Tokyo Game Show, but I'm not sure if we will make that deadline. I don't like throwing out bits to string people along with small updates. So I want to show it when it's ready. Okay, so this is, I think, a pretty big acknowledgement from Yoshi P regarding the status of Final Fantasy 16. If y'all remember, at the PS5 showcase, which happened last year, it was basically just a series of games that we can expect for the PS5. Final Fantasy 16 was the first game that they showed, and there was some mixed reception to that trailer. Generally speaking, people got on board with it, but some people didn't like that it said it was PC footage, as all the other games were running on an actual PS5. And then also, people were not quite impressed with the graphics. They looked good, but they weren't what people expected for the next Final Fantasy game. It looked kind of like early development. And we actually talked about this a little bit. I mean, you could see in the trailer, like, they were clearly showing areas with lots of fog in the background, so they wouldn't have to build out the trees and stuff in the background, or it'd be like on the side of a mountain. So like you'd only see the sky and like a hill, right? So it was just, they're obviously choosing choice shots, so they didn't have to kind of work all that stuff out. And there wasn't a user interface or anything like that. So it seemed like it was kind of early in development, like it was going to be a ways. But then Jason Schreier, who used to work at Kotaku, he heard some like leaked information that the game was coming out earlier than we think. So, everyone was commenting at the time, oh, this thing's not coming out for 10 years. And Jason Schreier just tweeted like, oh, it's coming out earlier than you think. And then he was anticipating a year or two. And Yoshi P commented on it as well and said that, this game's not going to take as long as, like, I see people saying, oh, it's going to take 10 years. It's not going to take 10 years, And so people read into that and assumed like, okay, the game's coming out in 2021, and Yoshi P promised they were going to show more Final Fantasy 16 gameplay or just more information with Final Fantasy 16 in 2021. So people were expecting the game to come out this year. Everyone expected it to appear at E3, and it's just been any kind of Sony show. There's all this speculation about, oh, is it going to be there? Is it going to be there? Is it going to be there? So this is, in my opinion, Yoshi P just jumping ahead and saying, this thing's probably not going to be a Tokyo Game Show. Honestly, from this acknowledgement of the status of Final Fantasy 16, I think was pretty telling, because he basically said like, no, we're not going to show anything until like we pretty much have a release date. Like he said, he didn't like this idea of stringing people along. It's kind of taking pot shots, I think, at earlier Final Fantasy games, maybe Final Fantasy 15, where they're just showing like little tidbits for 10 years. He doesn't want to do that. And so, I think that honestly, I don't know where you're at, but I'm not expecting this game till I'm pounding the gavel 2023.
Wow. 2023.
Yeah.
I think 2022 is pretty realistic, I would say. I mean, it's definitely not coming out this year. I mean, there is a possibility it could, like towards the end of the year, I guess, but I just don't see it happening, because it's a big game. Like, this is a tentpole game, like, for their main franchise. And if you remember the last one, I mean, I guess you could include Final Fantasy VII Remake in that. There's a ton of marketing leading up to it. Before the game came out, they had that big showcase at E3 with like a live audience, showing new trailers and showing gameplay for the first time.
For Final Fantasy VII Remake?
For Final Fantasy VII Remake, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And then, but then for FF15, they had this like whole uncovered event where they had like these, announced all these anime tie-in, and they got a message from Hironobu Sakaguchi to endorse the game, and so I just don't see it happening this year, because it's a big deal, and the marketing push for it has just not been there, at least on the Western side. And even if they were to show it and like announce a release date at Tokyo Game Show, I don't know how much of the Western audience who they want to buy the game tunes into Tokyo Game Show. That's usually more of like the kind of the JRPG nerd culture, like us, right, that are paying attention to those kind of things. But like for E3, or perhaps if they were to have like a Sony State of Play dedicated only to Final Fantasy 16, that would be a way to market the game to the West. And there just doesn't seem to be an indication that that's going to happen anytime soon. And also, I was looking at the schedule for the games coming out for Square Enix for the rest of the year. We have coming up soon The World Ends With You. We have some Life is Strange games in September, and then Guardians of the Galaxy in October, and then Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker in November. So I don't really see a place where they can fit such a big game like into their release schedule by the end of the year without inevitably cannibalizing the sales of those other games.
But the reason I say 2023, and I think everything you brought up is on point. I agree with that completely. But the reason I say 2023 is because that trailer last year was not like, there was
polished.
A lot of, it was not polished at all. I mean, it looked fine for what they were trying to do, but it just wasn't polished. And then when you think about the fact that this is an expensive game, right? This is one of their most expensive franchises. And then we look into the fact that this is, at least at its launch, going to be a PS5 game, right? But there's that 6-month exclusivity to PS4. And right now, I don't know about you, but I can't go buy, exclusive to PS5, for 6 months. And then it's going to come to the PS4. I don't know about you, but I can't go into GameStop and buy a PS5. So, right? So, and I know that Sony's talking about creating a new PS5 and they're going to try to launch that in 2022. But I think that Square's just going to look at that and say, I don't know if we really want to just push this game out with that small install base,
Well, they didn't have a problem making the Yuffie DLC exclusive to PS5. And that was like way earlier in the PS5's life cycle, right?
I guess I just look at that as like not as expensive. And I think that was probably developed and planned earlier on before COVID. And, maybe that's a cheap way of pushing their fan base to the PS5, saying, hey, you want to play this? You got to play the PS5. And they're trying to get people ready for the idea that, okay, Final Fantasy 16 is around the corner. You need a PS5, guys. Come on. Get that console. We want you to buy this game at $70. We don't want you to wait 3 years to pick up a PS5 and get this game for $15 at, GameStop if it's still around. So that's why I'm leaning towards 2023. It's just, I don't think it's going to make a lot of sense for them. And plus, Yoshi P seems hell-bent on taking his time, which I think is a really good thing. But I don't get the impression like there's like this deadline, like I did with Final Fantasy 15, where Tabata was given this impression like, no, we got to get it out by this date,
Right. I guess 2023 would be surprising to me because of just the, like, what do they have coming in 2022 then? Because like I was listing the games they have coming out at the end of 2021. They want periodic releases of games, and then to have one or two like big sellers every year.
Yeah.
And I don't think is FF7 Remake going to be ready for 2022. I would think that game would be the 2023 release, and then they would want FF16.
Sure. So I think
sometime in 2022.
I think it's a little bit of a problem. I think that COVID's kind of goofed things up a little bit, right? Because I'm sure that pre-COVID, they were looking at 2022, I would imagine. But the thing is, I think number one, they were looking at Paradise Lost or whatever the hell that game's called, the Final Fantasy 1 remake. That's like a Souls type game. That's coming out next year. I think they were hoping that was going to be more well received. I mean, they have small stuff like the mobile FF7 games, the remakes of all the Final Fantasy 7 games are coming out in chapters on mobile. And then also, we don't know, there might be additional DLC for the 7 remake that's announced next year also. So I feel you that like there's that rough spot where they're not going to really have anything, but at the same time, I mean, I don't see Yoshi P launching a game with crappy, because if you release it in 2022 and it's a PS5 exclusive, it's not going to have good sales, right? So to say, oh, they don't have anything to launch, for that window to make any money. I mean, I don't think they want to be like, oh, yeah, you know, that game we spent hundreds of millions of dollars on? Yeah, we made like a third of the profit we thought we were going to make.
They may be able to eat those lower sales depending on how much Sony paid them for the console exclusivity, like the 6-month console exclusivity. We don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how much that cost. That's true. I just can't. I can't imagine it was that much. I guess it probably wasn't cheap though. You're right.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is all speculation and we don't know for sure. I mean, it's possible we could come to that Tokyo Game Show this year and Yoshi P could just be like, psych, you know, because he did do that before, right? He commented,
he does troll. Yeah.
He commented a couple months before announcing Final Fantasy 16 where they were talking about, oh, the rumor mill is that you're the directing 16 and that like it's coming out blah, blah, blah soon. And he called it fake news and that it was really harmful to the industry or something like that.
Yeah. And then he was confirmed as producer.
Yeah.
Right. Of the game. So I guess the idea that he was director was actually fake news, but mostly people were just saying he's on the project, like he's involved. Right. That's what people were getting at. Nobody knew his official title, or, you know, or anything like that. But
right, and he knew
he pretty much flatly denied that he was involved, and then sure enough, he was. So
yeah, and this own statement that he has, he doesn't deny that it won't be a Tokyo Game Show. He just strongly implies that it probably won't be there because it's not ready.
Not ready yet.
And he doesn't like stringing people along. So who knows? I mean, things change at companies all the time. You know, they say something, then they go to like 9 different meetings and they change their mind. And like, okay, well, maybe we can put like a little 30-second trailer up or something. You know, maybe we can show something a little bit more to get people excited because we aren't going to have anything in 2022 or it's going to be a long wait. But I do agree that I think next year at E3, we'll get a lot more for sure. I would imagine.
Yeah.
And there might even be a playable demo if you go to E3 at that point, like they did with the 7 remake. I definitely think that. I'm looking at 2023, kind of like the April timeframe that the 7 remake came out in, you know, last year. So I'm getting ballsy here. I'm getting down to a specific month, but I'm calling it April 2023.
I like
and
it.
then I think the game's going to come out in 2023, April. And then at that E3, they're going to have 7 Remake Part 2.
Huh. I feel like
like a trailer.
No, I think like fall of 2022. It's
really,
it's going to be. I think it's going to be kind of where they have like Guardians of the Galaxy or Endwalker pegged for this year. Next year will be Final Fantasy 16. I guess 2023 is a possibility though. I would say there's like a 5% chance it's coming out in 2021, right? Which is very unlikely.
I say 0.
and then more of like a 60% chance for 2022. And then what does that leave me with? Like 35% for 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a strong possibility that they will announce that it's coming out holiday 2022, but I don't think it's actually coming out then. I think they'll delay it.
The inevitable delay.
Because they always do that. Every big Square Enix game gets delayed.
Well, Yoshi P though, he's trying to change.
He'll delay it. He doesn't care. I don't think he's going to put out a buggy game like just to, like
right.
Because no one will appreciate that he's changing the industry, you know, without delaying.
If he releases an unfinished product,
yeah.
I wonder if our friend Jeff Keighley is calling Square Enix Japan and being like, hey, you know, if you need a little more time, you know, my Game Awards show isn't till December, you know, so
he's like, we're I'm trying to think of what crappy band he'd have on there.
Like, we'll slot you in right after Weezer, right, or whatever.
Yeah, we're gonna have freaking Uncle Cracker. He's gonna be singing, and your game will come right after. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is though. Okay, cool. So let's move on. We have Cris Tales. Now, this is a game that I've been looking forward to. We've talked about several times, and Stan, I know you mentioned at some point you'd like to pick it up. Were you able to pick it up this time?
No, I just haven't had the time
Yeah.
for it. It's been real busy. So, but it looks great.
Yeah. So I picked it up for Switch. So I've put, 6 or 7 hours into the game thus far. I just want to give you guys kind of like a rundown of my pros and cons for the game. I was trying to think about like what's the best way to get into this, because there are some cons with the game that I have to acknowledge. The pros of this game are really, really good. I just want to get into that first. Some of the big things that stood out to me are, number one was just the obvious artwork of the game. If y'all are not aware, this is literally hand-drawn artwork that is put into this game, and it's just beautiful. And when I say beautiful, like, it looks tremendous on the Switch. I was trying to look around for like official word on the resolution, but dude, this thing's locked 720p. It feels like it looks really good in handheld, which is a big deal because a lot of Switch games in handheld mode are not 720p. I mean, they'll say dynamic 720p, which really means, like the intro movie 720p, and then everything else is like whatever it can run is what it's going to be at.
Yeah.
It's like jumping all over the place. I mean, it looks really, really good. It looks really sharp. And I think this game, even like 20 years from now, is going to look good because of that art style.
That's cool. That is the thing that grabs your attention first, right off, like looking at trailers for the game and everything, is the art style looks very crisp and unique. Also, not like generic anime or not like other things you've seen before. It has kind of like a unique style.
It doesn't look like a mobile game.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of these indie games are starting to look like. Granted, sometimes I'm not ever sure if saying something's an indie project is offensive or not, but this is a fairly bigger budget game, but it's not Final Fantasy 16 or Octopath Traveler big. But so I think this game, honestly, it's on every console, but I think that if people are looking at getting that Switch OLED that we're going to talk about in a little bit, I think that this game would look even better on that thing. I mean, I'm sure it'll look just like magnificent. So the other thing that I want to point out too is the soundtrack is just freaking out of this world good. I'm kind of picky with my soundtracks. I actually looked up the guy's name. His name is Tyson Wernley. It's Wernli. And he looks like he's pretty new on the scene for game development. He's done some documentaries and stuff like that. So he's not, completely new to composing. Like, this guy's so good. I mean, everywhere I go, I just want to just sit there for like a little bit and just kind of like listen to the soundtrack. It captures the mood of whatever the story's trying to convey at the point in time. I just feel like every component of this game just works hand in hand with each other. I'm talking about artwork. I'm talking about music, voice acting, user interface is really Persona 5-esque in style. I really, really liked just the overall presentation of the game. I'm really big on that. I don't feel like I'm playing a video game. I feel like I'm traversing a world. The big other draw of this game is the time mechanic. So if you're not aware, the entire game is about this girl called Cris, and she acquires this ability to travel through time or to change the past or the future. It's pretty interesting, dude. I got to be honest, because whenever you're traveling around this world, whenever you're in, towns or dungeons, the screen's split into 3 views. And on the left is the past, on the right is the future, and the center is the present. And it's literally showing you the map you're on and past, present, and future at the same time simultaneously. And so whenever you're traveling around the map, I'm just constantly, oh, I wonder what that house looks like in the future, and then you'll go over it. It's like all busted down, and then you'll go back to the present. It's there. Then you'll go to the past and it's completely just a forest. It adds a lot of variety to the map for you to just kind of like get a lot of interest in exploring, right? Because you're just constantly trying to see, what's the differences between all these. And they actually incorporate it into like the side quests. For example, one of the side quests, like I said, that house that was kind of like busted down, you needed to, it was busting down because there was this rot that got into the wood. And since you knew that was what caused it, you in the present, you knew the rot was in there, but it hadn't taken a hold yet. So you needed this special herb to put on the wood to like clear the rot. But you could only grow that herb off this like tree that will only produce it like once every decade. but all you have are seeds, right? So you go and plant it, then you travel to the future, you grab the herb, then you travel back to the present, you treat the house, and then you look in the future, and now the house is good to go. And so it uses the time mechanic with side quests a lot in that regards. And so it's pretty cool. Like it's definitely a different take on the traditional RPG, and I really like it.
That's kind of a reminiscent of Chrono Trigger in some ways, where you you get the sunstone side quest, but it's like it hasn't been powered up, so you put it in a place where the sunlight shines, and it's like an isolated cave, but the sun beam is coming on it, and then you travel to the future so that you can just pick it up and it's like powered up, or that time where you leave Robo behind to like start planting a forest, then you just travel to the future, and then this place that was completely sparse was now just like a thriving forest, and you find him in the forest, and he's like broken down because he was just working for like 500 years or whatever on this forest.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Chrono Trigger, because I do get vibes of Chrono Trigger influence in this game. Obviously it's a different art style and things like that, but I do feel like there's some inspiration there with the time travel element, because a lot of it does take on those kind of storytelling moments where, okay, let's put this in the past, let's put this in the future and see, the outcome. But also one of the main characters in the game is this talking frog, which in Chrono Trigger, you had Frog as a main character, right? This frog in this game his name's Matthias, and everything's fully voice acted, by the way. It's crazy. But I love Matthias's voice actor. It's very like eloquent. Reminds me of how Frog would talk in Chrono Trigger. But he's kind of a different take of the style. Is like he's an actual frog. He doesn't carry around a sword or anything. He doesn't like assist you in combat, but he's got like a big top hat, and he follows you around, and he's kind of guiding you on your journey to becoming this time mage, right? And he assists you with time travel, and that he's able to travel through time, but he needs Cris to send him back. So when you do these side quests where you have to go to the past or the future, Cris is able to see the past or the future, but she's only able to send Matthias back. So if you send Matthias to the past, you control the frog and you have to hop around, and then, but Cris sits there and comments and converses with him, during these segments. So it's kind of a interesting take, but the whole time I kept thinking, man, this really brings me back to playing Chrono Trigger in a way, which I really like, except Cris actually talks, unlike Chrono. So it's kind of cool. And I really appreciate it for that. There are some cons. I would say that I picked it up on Switch, and even though it's beautiful on the Switch, it has obnoxious loading screens right now. And I've seen that in every review. I've even seen that on the PS5 and Xbox Series X version. Although the loading screens is supposed to be like kind of cut in half on those versions, there are still loading screens on those versions as well, which I don't understand. But these loading screens are like 7 to 10 seconds long, and they're frequent enough that it is kind of annoying at times. Although I grew up at a time where we had lots of loading screens, so I quickly just adapted to it. But I can imagine that if you're a newer gamer, or I don't say newer, but maybe you grew up in the PS3 generation, then, you're used to loading screens, but you're used to loading screens for like AAA titles, not something like this. So it might be kind of annoying, especially since sometimes these loading screens are associated with the random encounters of the game as well. So that can be kind of annoying when it's like a 5-second pause in between the battle, right? But the thing is, like, the reason it's loading is because they have the past, present, future of every map of every NPC. So when it loads a map, it's loading 3 maps, right? It's not loading 1 map because they have to load.
They're all layered on top of each other at all times.
Yeah,
right?
and they're all different. Like it's not like it's like, oh, it's like slightly different color. Like they're all dramatically different. And so also even in like towns, battles, you got to think about it. They have to load NPCs for 3 different versions. And then they got to load the voice acting files for all 3. And it's just a lot of stuff that they have to load. And, there's like moving parts and waterfalls that are like kind of like just animating in the background and stuff like that. So I think that that's one of the biggest reasons why you have these loading screens. And I've seen every review I've seen, they've brought this up that it's like kind of annoying to, leave a town and then you have a 7-second loading screen and then you get in a battle. It's a 4 to 5 second loading screen, that type of thing.
The game is also on PS5 as well. So I wonder if the SSD is able to load things faster.
That's the thing. Like I've looked up reviews on that and they still brought up that they were just mad that there was loading screens in general on the PS5.
Okay.
Yeah. But from what I've seen, that the loading screens are quicker on the PS5 version. So, I mean, yeah. So I don't have a PS5, but it made me want to, man, maybe I should have got this on PC because I have an SSD on my PC.
Yeah.
And I can just play it that way. But it is something to bring up. And I do hope they are able to work around it. Again, I'm very happy that I got the game on Switch because it is a beautiful looking Switch game, but the load times are the worst on the Switch. So I'm just like, God damn it, where's our Switch Pro? So, and the other thing, like I said, there was random encounters. I don't think people are going to like that. And one other thing is you're unable to save wherever you are. You have to either be at the world map or you have to be at these like campsites. And they're not campsites. I've only experienced like 2 of them. So mostly it's the world map. And I don't like that because sometimes I get stuck in story segments and I just can't save. And I'm trying to go to bed, and I'm like, dude, this is burying me right now, like just let me save. But I wonder if because of all the different past, present, future maps they were loading that maybe they were worried about bugs and someone's saving with a bug or something like that. So maybe there might be a patch in the future. I haven't heard anything, but I could see that being implemented later, but I don't like that. I think in 2021, you should have save spots basically everywhere, or like Dragon Quest 11, where it just had your save, whatever zone or whatever, frequent enough to where it doesn't feel fatiguing,
Yeah. That is kind of like the old school RPG design. Have to be at a specific spot to save, and also random encounters, like you mentioned.
Yeah,
that's another. I'm not a big fan of those anymore. That's one aspect of the old RPGs that I'm like, this isn't. I don't mind that they change this. When the enemies are on the map,
yeah,
you can avoid them or fight them. Yeah.
This is actually better.
Yeah,
yeah. It's an easy win for sure.
Yeah, and I haven't heard any developers come out and say like, no, the random encounter is essential to the spirit of the JRPG. It's like, no, it was a memory issue, right?
Yeah, it was like
couldn't have that many things on the screen, like on the overworld or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do like with the Final Fantasy games, right? I do like the backgrounds that they would have for these games, where it would kind of like bring it to life, right? Where it'd be like a little bit more realistic interpretation of a town or something like that. That would be really cool. But that's like really the only positive to
a random encounter. Yeah.
Well, because it would warp you to a separate screen, right? So the only other thing I'd point out is, and this is really small, but I bought the physical version, and it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. I bought the physical version of the Switch game, put it in my Switch, and then it downloaded a 2 gigabyte patch. And the game's 5 gigabytes. So, and
modern gaming for you.
Yeah. And apparently, the patch, I was like, what the hell's in this? Because at first I thought I bought the game and it just installed the entire game. And I was like, well, then why did I buy the physical version? Like, this is stupid, right? But the patch, it contains like more cutscenes, extended cutscenes. Like it had a lot of big file size stuff like that in it. So, yeah, modern gaming for you for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in conclusion, I really liked it. It's just, and I would recommend it. I would just say, maybe get it on PC if you can. If you want to play it on Switch, I'm playing it on Switch. Clearly, I've enjoyed it, but just be wary of those load screens, and as long as you know what you're getting into on the Switch version, it is nice to just kind of chill on the couch and play it on there. So, but other than that, I would recommend probably picking this up on PC if you have a SSD, or just, if you have a PS5 or a Series X, maybe try picking it up there. But it's a definite recommend for me. And, I think that this type of game probably appeals mostly to JRPG players. So if you're a Western gamer that, plays Witcher 3 and Western RPGs in general, you're a Fallout guy or gal, and you occasionally will play a JRPG, this might not be your cup of tea, because it is pretty JRPG. I mean, we got turn-based battles, we got kind of the anime voice acting, although it's well done. It is kind of that flavor, so it may not appeal to everyone, but I really liked it. So
nice.
Yep. So anyways, definitely go pick that up. Let's move on though. I want to get into the Switch OLED, and we'll talk about the Steam Deck here, and we'll wrap up this podcast. So I was very disappointed about this Switch OLED. I'm just going to come out.
Yeah.
Say that. But this thing was announced a couple weeks ago, and the pre-orders went up and they're sold out. But basically it's a new Switch model. If you're unaware, there's a new Switch model coming out in October, and it's going to have a 7-inch OLED screen as opposed to the 6.2-inch LCD screen of the current Switch. So it's going to have a bigger screen, and it's going to be a better screen. OLED screens are going to be a lot more vibrant with the colors, and it's going to be, a little bit better contrast, that type of thing. So the image quality should be better. It's going to have a better stand in case you want to use the kickstand on the back of the Switch, which I've never used before, but people that do use the kickstand to set it up in handheld mode, I guess the kickstand breaks. So this one's a stronger kickstand. So that's cool. And then the dock itself is going to have a Ethernet port, right? So that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Previously it was Wi-Fi only, and the Wi-Fi on the Switch sucks. So being able being able to connect via Ethernet will be a big deal. And then the console itself, it's going to have 64 gigabytes of internal storage, whereas the original Switch had 32 gigabytes of internal storage. So that's pretty cool. And it's going to have enhanced audio. So no one really knows what that means, because the audio wasn't bad before, but it does look like they put the speakers on the front of the Switch, which is an improvement, because right now the speakers are on the back of the Switch, which after I saw this, I was thinking, well, that is kind of dumb.
Yeah.
Like to have the speakers going away from me, but I always just put my headphones in. But it is cool to have better audio. And so that's basically it right now. I mean, there's a new version that's going to be a white Switch, and it's matching the Metroid Dread kind of color scheme. So people want it also for that reason. But anyways, so this is the Switch. It's going to be $350 as opposed to the regular $300. A lot of people are thinking that this is going to phase out the current Switch model.
That would make sense.
Yeah, and this will be the new regular Switch. And a lot of people were very kind of heated that this, Nintendo's had all these revisions for the Switch model. They've had the Switch Lite. They didn't even have a name for the last regular Switch revision. It was just more battery life. And then now they have this 7-inch OLED screen. So Nintendo's downing on the portable aspect. And a lot of people are saying, hey, like I play my Switch almost exclusively docked, and you're not really giving us anything for docked players ever.
Yep.
And so it's just like, what am I going to do with this? And, obviously this has that Ethernet port, but that's about it, man. And apparently they're going to sell that dock separately also on the store. So a lot of people are like, okay, I'll just buy the dock. But here's the thing. I'm just going to get into, there's so many different angles to this, and there's so many different components we can talk about, but let's just talk about personally, like our thoughts with getting this console first. And with me personally, I am one of those people that play a lot docked, just because I like to record game footage and stuff like that. And I have an M Classic that upscales at the 1440p. So I can't do that in handheld. So I do play docked a lot of times. And so this definitely is not the most appealing device for me. And a lot of these upgrades are things like I've already done. Like, okay, cool. It's got 64 gigabytes of internal storage. Well, I have a 512 gigabyte SD card in my Switch. So I'm not spending $350 for your extra 32 gigabytes of internal storage that I could buy on Amazon for like $6. Okay.
Right.
The OLED screen is nice, but I primarily play docked. So that won't do any good for me. And if I'm gonna spend $350, I'd rather put that towards an OLED TV. That would make Switch games look great on my TV rather than this 7-inch OLED screen. And like the original Vita, dude, in 2011 had an OLED screen.
It did. Yeah.
So it's not like this is like cutting edge technology.
No, that was advanced for the time, right? For the Vita.
Yeah, but here we are 10 years later.
Yeah.
And they're just putting an Ethernet port on there. Like, I'm pretty sure my PS3 had an Ethernet port. So that's not really like oh, look at this Pro model. It's more like, oh, thanks for getting to like the PS3 generation,
Yeah.
So I don't really see a point in me buying this for $350. I do think that, if I were to drop my Switch and break it, I had to buy a new one, I would absolutely get this model because at that point it just makes sense. But I'm not going to go spend $350 to have an Ethernet port. And the thing is, I already bought an Ethernet adapter for like $15 that like just plugs in via USB and then I connect an Ethernet cord. So it's not even like I can already do that, and I don't use the speakers on the Switch. I use headphones. So really the only thing appealing here is that OLED screen. And I'm just not going to do that, especially since Nintendo has said they're looking at the Switch lasting another 4 to 5 years. So there's probably going to be another revision. My words, another revision. And it's probably going to have an OLED screen. So,
yeah.
I would rather have had a hardware bump, like a new chipset that has, people are talking about 4K. I never thought that was a thing, but
let's get it to 720p first, right? Consistently.
Yes. 720p handheld 1080p, like the actual vision for the Switch. Let's just do that. Let's not have these games. People are talking about Hyrule Warriors on the Switch. It gets down to like 10 frames per second. Can we have that at 30? So like that's the type of revision I was hoping for. And unfortunately, at least right now, they're going with this OLED model and it's not there. And the price honestly is kind of offensive to me too. $350, because we know for a fact that Nintendo was making a profit on the regular Switch model 4 years ago. And now it's been 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would imagine the price of those parts has gone down. And so Bloomberg did an article where they priced like what these increases would cost. And it was about $10 more. So, where are they getting this $50 now? Nintendo commented on Twitter that Bloomberg's article was wrong and that there's not this massive profit increase. So people are speculating, it might be, chipset shortages. It might be, increased weight and freight where they have to, ship the Switch. But anyways, that's like my kind of overall thoughts on me getting the Switch. I feel like I've babbled too long. Stan, where are you at with buying the Switch? Is this something that you're going to pick up?
No.
Okay.
I'm generally in the same boat in that I play mostly docked. So like I can't justify $350 for the time that I play in handheld mode to be better. It's
and only marginally better too. Like it's just...
Yeah. Like, I mean, I guess it's a great deal if you don't have a Switch and wanted to get one soon. I mean, the console's been out for 4 years now at this point though, right? So
yeah,
it's if you don't have a Switch, I don't know like if this is the thing that convinces you like now's the time. So, and then it is also confusing because I think it was Was it last year or year before the Switch Lite came out? I think it was last year, right?
Well, I think it was, yeah. So I think the time scale was about 2 years ago.
Oh,
And
2019?
Yeah, well, it may have been 2018. You want to look this up real quick? Because I know someone's going to be losing their mind that we're getting this incorrect. Because there was the Switch Lite, and then there was another like soft revision that didn't even have a name, but it was the better battery life. I forgot to mention that too. The 7-inch OLED model is going to have better battery life too.
That's good. Yeah. The Switch Lite came out in September of 2019.
Okay, so it was 2019, and then the revision came out, I think 9 months later or something like that. So, and now we have this model. So
maybe every 2 years they're like providing a new type of Switch or so.
Yeah, dude, honestly, that's what I'm thinking happened. I think that if Nintendo's correct and they're not lying, which is possible, and the Switch is going to last another 4 to 5 years, there's going to be another revision. I would imagine. Like, and I can't.
Is that the elusive Switch Pro?
Well, I can't imagine what else they would do, right?
Yeah, I mean they've made 2. This is now the second one that is like very focused on an upgrade for the handheld, like the primarily handheld players. You had the Switch Lite, which was only handheld, but at a lower price point.
Yeah.
Right now they have like an enhanced one that is at a higher price point, but primarily all the upgrades are if you play it handheld.
Yeah.
So you would think that the next step would be an enhanced version for people who play it docked.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But like knowing Nintendo, they're probably going to be like, "Oh, it's going to be a medium light or something." It's going to be a 5.5-inch screen, and people are going to say, "Oh, wow, this is perfect." The light's too small, the OLED's too big, the regular model is too big. This is just right. This is perfect. I don't know, but there's lots of. Look, there was a lot of angry people online about the fact that this was not a Switch Pro, and that, there was all these articles being written by very reputable sources, talking about a Switch Pro. And ultimately, that's not what was announced this time. And the thing is, people got to realize is that these articles that were, it's not like this was written, these Switch Pro things were written by some guy on 4chan, right? Like there was actual information that was being
about like the chips that are being sent to the manufacturing area where Nintendo makes their products and stuff like that, right?
Well, yeah, and not only that, these same people that are talking about Switch Pro also predicted the Lite model, and then also said in October they were going to announce an OLED model. And that's actually literally what happened.
That's what's happened, yeah.
So
pretty good track record so far.
Yeah, but but the thing is also other people have taken that information and they've done their journalistic duties, and you can look at different things like you said, and they can kind of put the pieces together. When you have multiple sources at Nintendo that have leaked to you that they're talking about hardware revisions, and then you're looking at, oh wow, there's a 7-inch OLED screen at factories that only make Switches. like it's not that hard to kind of, and Nvidia's like, yeah, we've just signed a multi-decade relationship deal with Nintendo, who only makes hardware. Like it's not like you're just pulling this out of your ass, right? And so but there is going to be a certain degree of speculation, and I do think that at one point in time, I do think that this Switch model was going to be a Switch Pro. And then they probably looked at it and said, you know what? Well, why would we try to compete with the PS5 and the Xbox right now? We need to focus on what's unique with our console. And we're going to triple down on the mobile aspect, right? Because, okay, cool. Go play your PS5, go play your Xbox, but you can't take this to the park, but you can with our Switch. So I think that number one, they're looking at that. Number two, they're looking at, the fact that you can't even buy a PS5 right now. You can't buy an Xbox easily. And, they're already having scalping issues with the regular Nintendo. So they probably looked at it and said, why would we, they Switch has sold 84 million units. I mean, they're crushing it right now because their competitor, no one's buying their competitor because they can't get the consoles, right?
Yeah.
No one's buying a PS4 because there's a PS5 out, So they probably thought, why would we come out with a Switch Pro and then it's going to sell out and no one's going to be able to buy it, and we have all these chip shortages because of X, Y, and Z regarding the pandemic, and no one's going to buy our main Switch because the Switch Pro.
If there's a Pro model available and you have a lot of stock of the regular Switch, then.
Yeah, so like now I'm kind of like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Like this probably is a better move for them, to be honest. So I do get it in a certain respect, but the people are getting mad about this.
If only they could think through the situation like you did, Hat, right before going online and typing nasty comments about no Switch Pro.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, Nintendo never officially announced the Switch Pro. So
it's just been leaked. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little weird to get upset about that. But then I also understand, like, you're a consumer of Nintendo products, right? So you as a consumer, if that's what you want, you have the right to be disappointed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, no one ever told me that Final Fantasy VII Remake was going to be, turn-based or something or whatever, right? Yeah. But I could still be like, well, this is stupid. I didn't like this. I want it to be this way. So I do think like you can still be kind of irritated with it. But at the end of the day, there's nobody out there that does not currently have a Switch that is like, I would buy a Switch, but like, it's just not powerful enough. Like the only people saying that are people that already own the Switch and are already buying Nintendo games. So I don't think like Nintendo's like, okay, you can complain, but you're going to buy Breath of the Wild 2. You're going to buy Metro Dread. You're probably going to buy this OLED model. Like, so like keep complaining, but it's not, it's just, I don't know. It's kind of interesting that it's a big deal to certain people, but it's not in the grand scheme to Nintendo to right now anyways. But I do think it's coming. I do think that they had plans, but plans change. So
yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, it does make sense that they'd want to kind of extend the life cycle of the Switch as long as they can, because the Wii U life cycle was short-lived.
Because no one bought that thing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it would make sense that they want this console generation to go as long as they could, and they will, as long as it's profitable.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, the Switch, original Switch, one of the reasons that was, alluring when it came out was because it came out midway into the PS4's life cycle. And so at that point, the cost of the hardware had come down enough to where they could put this out at $300 and people would look at it and be like, Jesus Christ, that looks good. And I think that if they were to, for the next Switch model, meaning like the Switch 2 or whatever the new Nintendo console is called, if they're going to keep going the Switch route, I think they're going to have to wait until they're kind of in a similar range with the PS5, like halfway into the PS5's life range. Because if they came out with a new Nintendo now, it's not, I mean, it would be better, but it wouldn't be,
right.
It wouldn't be comparable to a PS5 or anything.
Yeah, they want to continue to be a lower price, but still
in the ballpark.
Like good, but still good gaming experience, like relative to the competition at the time, right?
Yeah. So, I think they're going to try to drag this out as long as they can. So, hey, you can go pick up an OLED. I mean, the pre-orders are sold out, unfortunately, but I'm sure you'll be able to get one at some point if that's something you want. I mean, obviously, it's not a hardware upgrade, so all your games are going to run just as well. So you don't have to worry about that. But people are already selling their pre-order on eBay for like $800. Which boggles my mind because you can buy an OLED TV for like $1,100.
Yeah.
And instead of a 7-inch, you can have a 65-inch OLED screen. So, anyways, okay, so that's the Switch OLED, and we'll kind of tie this into the Steam Deck that's been announced. I actually was able to pre-order I got the most expensive option, but if you're not familiar with the Steam Deck, it's basically a device that looks very similar to the Nintendo Switch. It docks to a screen just like the Nintendo Switch, but basically what it is it's made by Valve, owners of Steam, on your PC, and it plays Steam games, right? And they're leaving it completely open for whatever you want to do. So if you want to put Windows on it and put a bunch of emulators on it, you can do that. But what's making a lot of waves with this device is it's much more powerful than the Switch. And for some of the price points that you're getting, people are like, man, this is like the Switch Pro that I wanted. And you've got the entire Steam library at your fingertips. And so, I'm not going to get crazy into the details here, but, it's got a CPU is an AMD Zen 2, core count is a 4-core 8 thread. I'm just reading right off PC Gamer. So if I sound like a moron, you know why. CPU clock speed is 2.4 to 3.5 gigahertz. It's got a GPU is AMD, I think a Retina RDNA 2, and GPU compute units 8. Hold on, let me skip some of the stuff. RAM is 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5. Storage, you have the option between 64 gigabytes of mechanical hard drive or 256 gigabyte of SSD or 512 gigabytes of SSD. It's got a 7-inch LCD touchscreen. And then it's also got like a mouse pad. It's got like, joysticks and traditional buttons on it. And it's got Bluetooth, which a Switch OLED doesn't. It's got multiple USB ports, USB-C type for USB, which is a big deal. Just basically everything you want, a display port that you can attach up to a monitor. And the 3 price points we're looking at is $400 for the 64 gigabyte version, $529 for the 256 gigabyte version. And the version I'm getting is a $649 for 512 gigabytes. And what's special about this is, number one, they let multiple people test it. There's been multiple videos, and it's running AAA games in handheld mode at 60 FPS, 720p, which Switch most of the time doesn't hit 720p, and handheld it hits like 540p, and it doesn't even hit 30 frames per second a lot of times. So this thing is much more powerful than the Switch. People have done kind of tech breakdowns and have compared it basically to on par with a PS4, like the base model, not a Pro version. But I mean, you can look at videos. I mean, it's running Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, or not Knights of the Old Republic. What was the last Star Wars game that came out? RPG.
Fallen Order.
Fallen Order. Thank you.
Yeah.
Running Star Wars Fallen Order, running Control, 720p, 60 FPS, no problem. People said the game's played great. And for the hardware that's in here, people that are in the know have said that this is unbelievable pricing on this. And like, what really stood out to me was this RAM. It's 16 gigabytes of RAM of DDR5. That's really good, RAM on that front. And so the reason I'm getting it is it's going to be a beast of a emulation machine. And it's just, I'm putting Windows on it, and it's going to be basically my laptop. I can hook up a mouse and a keyboard to it and right up to a monitor, if I want, or I can take it and play Dolphin, Wii games on there at 1080p or 720p. And I think it's just going to be great. And to have my entire Steam library at my disposal.
Deal.
Yeah. So, people are kind of speculative of the battery life. They say it's going to last 2 to 10 hours of battery life. And they said kind of control the game. You can get, I think 4 hours out of that game. Well, no, it wasn't Control. It was Portals. Portal 2, I think it was. Portal 2, you can look it up, but they said 4 hours for that game at, 720p, 60 FPS. So probably for games like Witcher 3, you're going to look at 2.5, 3 hours, something like that. But I'm not taking it with me on like a road trip. I mean, I'm going to have it plugged into the wall.
And if you do, there are like portable battery chargers that you can get, to enhance the battery. So
yeah.
Although that is more money on already a pretty expensive, but for the price, it's really impressive, right?
Yeah, I mean, so that's what people are saying, that this should be much more expensive than it actually is. And this came out was for pre-order 3 days after the OLED model. And a lot of people were like, oh, wow, all that frustration that people had about there not being a Switch Pro, and then this thing is announced. And while it's not going to have Mario games, it's not going to have, Nintendo games unless you're emulating Breath of the Wild on it. It's not going to have the Nintendo catalog, but I mean, dude, Steam games, there's a lot of overlap. I mean, you're looking at your Grandias, your Tales games, your Final Fantasy games. This thing's got to run Final Fantasy 15 on it, so
portable,
portable. And so it's a better device, dude, from what we've seen thus far.
Yeah. Now, if Nintendo was already planning to kind of delay a pro model of the Switch, well, they definitely are now. You definitely don't want to bring this Switch Pro out going, head to head with this machine.
Yeah, especially at this price point. That's the thing that's crazy, is the price. And Valve came out and they were like, yeah, we were kind of concerned about where to price this because we're not really in the console market. I mean, they've released little Steam boxes before, but this is a totally different thing. And they were like, we don't know what we should price it at. So we came up with a very competitive pricing. We're not really going to make any money on this. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get more people into PC gaming. Mm-hmm. So more people into the Steam ecosystem. And this is the way to do it, right? Because it's going to have the Steam OS on there. It's going to be, they said, programmed to just automatically pick the best settings for the Steam Deck unit. And so that's going to take some of the anxiety for people about getting a gaming PC, because you can attest to this. It's very kind of oh God, there's so many different parts. Am I getting ripped off? What should I get? What games is this going to run? And then once you get the game, you have to sometimes you have to go through the settings and kind of jack with the shadows and all this other stuff to get it to where you want it to run and all this other crap. And this is supposed to be no, we're just going to do all that for you. And you get to play these games on the couch.
Yep. That generally is a hurdle that's trying to convert somebody from a mainly console player to a modern gaming PC is all the options that you have to choose from. It's kind of there's people really into cars, right? And then want to build their own cars, but that's obviously a very expensive hobby.
Right.
Most people are just okay, give me a list of the features on the car. I want that one, right? They don't want to have to build their own, or swap out parts and install it themselves, on the car. No, people just want a car and then upgrade every few years or so. That's kind of the convenience factor. It's kind of the same, not a perfect analogy, but the similar to consoles, right? People just want a box that's going to last them for the next 5 to 8 years.
Yeah.
And then they buy a new box that has better stuff inside it.
Honestly, that's the thing, that because it took me a while to become a PC gamer. And I remember I just wanted to go into, I was getting so frustrated. I wanted to go into a Micro Center, and I wanted to go to the staff guy and be like, all right, just give me just give me the best one, And they're like, well, it really depends.
The best one depends on what you want to prioritize, right?
Yeah. Then they're like, there's the best one over here. It's $6,000. I'm like, okay, I don't want to spend that much. They're like, well, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to do video editing? Are you trying to it's it's just I just want a good computer.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, right now, these cards are really expensive, but if you wait a little bit of time, it's going to be less expensive, but you can really cheap out on this fan. It's just but this guy's saying, don't do that. And it's just
Yeah.
So,
whereas it's much easier to just
go to GameStop and they're like, oh, PS4 Pro.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. But this is going to make it a lot simpler. You have 3 options. I would say, a lot of people are going in on that base model for $400, which that's a steal, dude. That really is. and it has expandable SD storage. So even if you don't like these 64 gigabytes of internal storage, you can do the SD card as well. But the reason I didn't go for that model is because it's a mechanical hard drive as opposed to an SSD.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, like, if I'm already spending that much money, I'm just going to get the SSD. And I was like, I'm just going to get the 512. Give me the 512, because 256 gigabytes just does not feel big enough if I get really into it. I don't even think I'd be able to put my entire Steam catalog on there.
Well, yeah, because some portion of that is taken up by the operating system, and then other programs you install, and then you're going to have Witcher 3 on there, and then you're going to be down to 100 gigs, right?
Right. Like, especially if I put Windows on this, and then I'm putting like emulators on it, and then I'm putting like Wii games on it, and like, all these other things on there. Like, that's just going to fill up really fast. Now, you can use the SD card, and they said IGN's little review of the console where they showed footage of Star Wars Fallen Order playing on it at 720p 60 FPS. They said that was running off an SD card. So that wasn't even running off the internal storage, what they said would run even better. So you do have that option, but I just want the best one, because it's got a non-reflective screen on it as well too. The best one does. So that's just the one I went with. Now, I was able to reserve it for $5. And basically, when it comes down to it, when it comes into stock and they're going to send it to me, if I don't buy it, I'll lose that $5. So I can still opt out. But the best one is going to be available, they said, Q2 of next year. So, and the other cheaper models are going to be available Q1. So that's kind of my opt-in strategy of, okay, they're going to review like that 256 gigabyte SSD model, right? And if they're like, yeah, this thing's trash, then I can just lose the $5 and I'll be fine with that, right? Okay. So that's kind of my strategy here. But it's been lots of videos have come out, Digital Foundry, Linus Tooltips or Tech Tips or whatever, and everyone's saying the hardware and it's really good. There's hands-on impressions. They've said it's really good. So I'm thinking like it's open and shut case with this thing. But
yeah, it looks really impressive. The only thing that's kind of weird to me is like the button placement and like the D-pad placement next to the joysticks. It is literally like just like straight parallel with the joysticks, which
up top, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if that would feel awkward, but I'm sure you'd get used to it at some point. But
it's got the mouse pads under the joystick, so your thumb might accidentally press it or something.
Yeah, so they had to kind of squish the buttons and the joysticks up higher, which I don't know. It after so many years of like having the joysticks and the D-pads like kind of offset from each other, it might feel awkward to just be going like back and forth with your thumb. But I haven't actually held one in my hands, so I can't really judge.
Yeah, that's the thing. It looks weird, but then at the same time, people that got to play it said it actually felt pretty good. So, but I agree with you. It is weird. It's a very weird looking setup to have it up there like that. But I guess it is kind of a heavier system. It is going to be a little heavier than the Switch. So if you have the buttons up top like that, that means more of the device will be in your palms, right? As opposed to, with the Switch, it's kind of like,
okay,
most of it's hanging on top. So maybe it might feel a bit better like that.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. I'm gonna hook it up to a dock and connect it up to a screen. Sometimes when I go on road trips, get to a hotel, just right up to the TV, or just a monitor, because I have a little portable monitor as well. So I think it's gonna be great.
Yeah, this definitely took the wind out of the Switch OLED sales, I think.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's I look at it two ways. I look at it as it's either kind of, some people are acting like, oh, Switch is done. Like, oh, this is going to destroy the Switch. And I'm like, no, the Switch has sold 84 million units. This Steam Deck will sell like 2 million max,
Well, when it first comes out, probably because it's in short supply. Right?
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, it is sold out, or the pre-orders are out. It seems to have a very promising future, but I don't see it outdoing the Switch, because I still think there's a lot of people There's a lot of like the Switch audience is big. I mean, there's grandmas that play Animal Crossing on a Switch, like, there's little kids that play the Switch. Like you're not, this is compelling to a certain audience, and it's not compelling to the entire Nintendo audience. And the only people that, like I said before, that are wanting a Switch Pro are people that already own a Switch. So I'm not really sure how much this is really going to impact the Switch in the long run.
I think the price point is too high to be like really cut into Switch sales. If that base model was like $250, then I think there'd be a conversation to be had there. But right now, the Switch is still $300, right?
Well, you got to think about it. If they phase out the Switch, then you're looking at just the OLED model.
It's $350, yeah.
Yeah, so you can get OLED, or for $50 more, get that $400 model.
True. Yeah.
But maybe by the time thousands of games at your disposal.
Maybe by the time the current Switch is phased out and the OLED model is the only one you can get, at that point, then the price of the OLED model goes down.
So that $100 will be the big difference.
Yeah. There's just a lot of people not willing to pay much more than $300 for a gaming machine, right? So, and
that's true.
Steam Deck doesn't have a product for those people.
I guess the thing is, like, I can't walk into a GameStop and buy a Steam Deck. I don't think it's going to be sold at Walmart, right?
True. Yeah.
So I think that's the other thing too. This is kind of a niche item. If it blows up, sure, but I don't, like I said, I think this is going to largely appeal to, certain types of people. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that's not even going to come on their radar.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways this might actually take the pressure off Nintendo to come out with a Switch Pro, because like I said, all the people wanting a Switch Pro already own a Nintendo Switch, right? So they're like, good, go buy that thing, and you're still going to buy your Breath of the Wild. You're still going to buy your Metroids. And, the only sales that they're going to be losing on is that third party choice. And that really is the kicker is, if you don't have Witcher 3 yet on Switch and you have a Steam Deck, are you going to buy the Switch version, or are you going to buy the Steam Deck version? You're going to buy the Steam Deck version.
For sure. Yeah.
So that's where it's going to come down to hurting Nintendo at all, is just, the third party ports are just not going to be as good as it would be on a Steam Deck.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know.
Yep. We'll see what happens. It was definitely interesting. I didn't expect that announcement. Did you? I had no idea there was something like that coming.
I felt out of the loop. People were like knew that Valve was going to be coming out with a new device like a month or two in advance, but they didn't know what it was going to be, and there wasn't a lot of discussion about it. And so it didn't even come up on my radar, to be honest, until it was announced.
Here we are. We've been chasing Switch Pro leaks and rumors for like 2 years, and then this thing just drops. Boom, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny. I was listening to some of the hands-on impressions from one of the reviewers at IGN, and it was kind of funny because he said that, the same guy that reviewed the OLED Switch also reviewed the Switch Deck. He got to do both. And the time frame from when he got to do the hands-on impression was really weird, because it was like on Monday, he went to like some place to play the OLED, and then he got up in the morning on Tuesday and went to go play the Steam Deck. And then he had to review both of them, and it was like hard for him to not like
trash the Switch.
Well, no, he didn't say that. He was just like, he wanted to like only talk about the OLED, for the OLED, and only talk about, and not make it like a compare and contrast, because it was supposed to, like, the agreement was just to like, hey, here's my hands-on impression with the Switch, compare it to the previous Switch, not the first thing you put out there is let's compare and contrast,
Right.
But now he did do that later on like additional follow-up like podcasts and stuff. You can go check that stuff out. But yeah, I mean, he basically said like, okay, like the OLED screen, when I put it next to a regular Switch, it did look better. I did speaker tests. The speakers sounded a little bit better, and colors are more vibrant. The LCD screen looks dimmer next to the OLED screen, and he's like, I think a lot of people are going to like it, but it's not a necessary buy. And then for the Steam Deck, he was like, man, this thing was great. Like it was playing these games that I was really surprised how well it worked. And but again, he brought up just it's not for everyone because PC gaming is kind of intimidating and that type of thing. So yeah. Anyways, I think we're going a little long with this. Is there anything else you want to bring up with either the Switch OLED or just the Steam Deck or anything else that we've been talking about?
Oh, no, I think we pretty much covered it all. So
okay,
time to wrap things up.
Cool. All right. So like I said before, we're going to do a little bit better with our episodes. We're going to try to get this thing back on track. Like I said, Eric is going to be taking a little bit of a break. He's got his kid coming, so he's going to be off for about a month or two. So it's just going to be me and Stan and any guests we invite on. And we have gotten some of your suggestions on Discord. So if you want to do that, there's a Discord link in the description. You can go in there to a podcast discussion or podcast questions and just kind of suggest an idea of what you want us to discuss. And other than that, I guess we'll see you all next week.
Yep.
All right. Take it easy.
See you next time.
Hey, thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And also, check out our audio version. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and practically any podcatcher you can think of. Also, we have a fantastic media partner at rpgfan.com. Be sure to go check them out for your latest RPG reviews and news, as well as some other kick-ass podcasts with Rhythm Encounter, Retro Encounter, and Random Encounter. Go check them out. We'll see you next time.